Hello, we want to thank you for joining us as we share what we've discovered about the exit and entry of business leaders in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm Marielle Gauthier.
And I'm Kathleen Ozmun.
And we're happy you're with us today. So we want to give you a quick introduction of who we are. As I said, my name is Marielle Gauthier. I'm the owner of Redworks Communications and Coaching. I've worked in the public relations field as a communication strategist for more than 20 years. And for the past 10 years, I have been working as a professional executive coach. I support leaders of small to medium-sized organizations make improvements in individual and team performance to achieve their goals and better outcomes. Depending on what the client or project needs, I do this through coaching, consulting, training, and facilitation. My areas of focus are succession planning, retirement planning, strategic planning, mid-career changes and transition, communication, including crisis communication, and personal and professional performance.
And hello, everyone. I'm Kathleen Ozmun, and for the past 20 years, I've been working with leaders and teams. And often I work with them when they start to think the training is not enough. So they've tried out their new skills and ways of working, and they continue to face poor performance, low productivity, or high turnover, either as a team leader or a team member. So I help leaders co-learn and co-create within their team or organization. And I really enjoy partnering with leaders who are transitioning into a new role and they want to up-level their leadership skills to create a positive impact or quickly build their teams that create real value for the stakeholders. Or lead business improvement projects and build the systems and processes to make that happen. So I work in a variety of roles in order to support you, your team, and your change projects to quickly and effectively get from point A to point B. And I'm the founder and principal of Crossing Point Coaching and Consulting. So when we started this research, we wanted to know, what are the challenges that incoming and retiring leaders are facing with these leader transitions as they exit or enter a business or an organization. So today, we are going to share some highlights from our research findings, including what's at risk for the business. What are these leaders' struggles that had been experienced? And what are the levels and types of supports that are in place at the different businesses? And what are the financial costs if the transition fails? As well today, based on our research findings and other practices that we reviewed, we'll be sharing strategic actions that businesses can take to really benefit from these exit and entry transitions. And we also have a report for you to download in the future, and the information for that will be at the end of this webinar.
So we wanted to talk about the drivers behind our research. As we know, Canada is in the middle of one of the biggest demographic waves in the country's history. The baby boomers have begun their transition into retirement. And we're going to be looking at or anticipating about 316,000 Canadians will be retiring every year until 2030. So over the next decade, when the last baby boomers will have turned 65 in 2030, that means that there'll be 3.3 million people will be retiring from the workforce over the next 10 years. And as I said, in 2030, every boomer will have turned 65 in this year. So how did we do this study? Well, we conducted 13 face-to-face 30-minute interviews. We did this between August and October of 2019. We interviewed 8 leaders who were in the C-suite top-level management, and then 5 leaders at other levels. And we interviewed these people from the following organizations. So 1 was post-secondary education, 2 was government, both provincial and federal. We did 2 not-for-profits and 7 for-profit, including 2 family-owned businesses. And none of the organizations were in direct competition with one another. So we want to jump right into the risks. What were the risks that we found from this research? So we know that a change in leadership, it's a time of flux and change for everybody, the leader and the team. And this creates risks at every level of the organization, and profitability, productivity, and positivity can be negatively affected. So there were many risks identified, and first one was the interruption of business and service. So not being able to achieve the business goals in the business strategy. Then it was cessation of services or programs because a specific individual was leaving. The level of productivity and project momentum were also reduced if retiring leader is distracted, worried, or feeling uncertain and undervalued. And then the loss of confidence and trust resulting in disengaged internal and external stakeholders. After that, we found financial, financial risk. So rehiring costs is, so if the transition is not very good, if it's failing, then the company would have to rehire those leaders. So that incurs some cost. There'd be some cost overruns as well. Income streams would be decreased just because of productivity or momentum. And then the company could also see revenue loss through inefficient operations. Staffing was also an area at risk where the senior leader would have been overburdened because he or she is focusing in on, also needs to do transactional HR on top of everything else that they are doing. The leader might not be the right fit for the role. And there might also be some confusion and uncertainty around the communication or lack of communication around the retirement and the transition from the retiring leader and the incoming leader. Also at risk are work relationships. So where the new leader has difficulties developing productive relationships with their direct reports, morale and job satisfaction decreases. There may also be significant turnover with the new leadership style, which would disrupt current staff. In fact, one respondent we talked to said that after 18 months, after having brought in a new leader, there had been a staff turnover of almost 50%. So you can imagine the cost of that. So that's a significant thought. And then a high functioning interdepartmental teamwork may also deteriorate. Professional development was also at risk, so where the organization undervalues the opportunity to identify and groom high potentials to be promoted to a leadership position. And then perhaps the organization be under-resourced for leader development. And then lastly, an inability to think strategically in complex organizations or situation. We had one respondent tell us that the leaders of his various departments were very good at thinking strategically for their department, but when the ask was, when they were requested to think more globally and at an organizational level, they had difficulties. So now we're going to discuss the leaders' struggles.
So based on the risks we just heard, we're going to go behind the scenes and share what created these risks. So, risks are created when the leaders struggle. And also, when you consider the leader's struggles in combination with the level of support in the workplace, you can see that they might continue to struggle. And we'll be looking at the supports later on. So let's start by looking at the struggles that both the retiring and incoming leaders had that were common to both of them. So the list, excuse me, it's important to note that the items in any of these lists are not in any particular order of importance. So the struggles that were common to both. I want to just highlight, first of all, the lifestyle or career path struggle. Both leaders were wondering what the future holds for them. You know, what kinds of activities a day, how much will they enjoy those activities? So For the retiring leader, they may not know what's next for them in retirement in terms of a lifestyle, and therefore be concerned about, how will they live their life on purpose? How will they spend their day, or with whom will they spend their day? And then for the incoming leader, they're not sure what their new role entails and whether or not they will be able to succeed in that role. So they want to know their career path. The family and financial struggles were about supporting family and about feeling that they had a sufficient income. And also both leaders had concerns about who should make the decisions for the organizational role that was now in transition. So for the retiring leader, they're wondering, should I make the decision for something in the future when I'm not going to be there in the future? And for the incoming leader, it was, should I be making this decision right now? I'm just, because they're really just new to the role, and perhaps even the organization. So then looking at the retiring leader, it's important really to realize that the struggles of the retiring leader include the decision about when to retire. So some struggles were about not being able to let go of their workplace because they were concerned about who will do their work, or even concerned to the point that they're wondering whether or not the organization will succeed after they leave. And some retiring leaders also struggled because they were not sure what they will do in retirement, while at the same time others were excited to go and create their retirement life. The retiring leader was also concerned about both their mental and physical health. And another struggle was not having a transition plan to smoothly and successfully leave their career work and create their retirement life. A big piece is that retiring leaders also struggle with how their identity will change as they leave their job title and organization, because both of these may be seen as valuable in their community and give them some influence in their social circles. For example, we had one respondent who was a leader for an organization that was very valued in the community, and they were wondering, just who will they be when they leave? Because number one, they were no longer in authority with that level of influence, and number two, people really saw them as the face of the organization in the community. Moving on to incoming leaders. The incoming leader faces a steep learning curve in order to, really understand the job role, the organization's processes and businesses, and the customer's needs. So often the incoming leader is faced with pressures to quickly develop skills, to become as efficient as the retiring leader, to build specific stakeholder relationships that are important to their success, and to gain key organizational knowledge to really maintain the project momentum and achieve business goals. So the leader can become overwhelmed or intimidated by these challenges. An example of the magnitude of the challenge is that one business said they were realizing that they were going to need to hire 2 people to replace the one that was going to retire. Additional struggles were experienced when the incoming leader was not a fit for skills and abilities, including this ability to think strategically that Marielle had just mentioned. And they didn't know how to manage or influence in the system in the organization. And in the upcoming slides, we'll see that several organizations had only basic onboarding or no support for the incoming leaders. So the combination of a steep learning curve with little support creates challenges for the incoming leader. And these range of struggles can impact the productivity and engagement level of the leader.
So now let's look at the supports in the workplace for leaders. So starting with the retiring leaders, here we see 3 different levels of support businesses currently have in place to support the retiring leader. So the first bar at the left indicates 58%, or 7 out of 12 respondents provided no support or no formal support. This means that the retiring leader may have had a supportive casual conversation with someone at work or had no support at all. We were surprised that 58% of businesses offered no support, because this rate is more than double the Canadian rate of 27%, as found by the 2015 Morneau-Chappelle study called Employer Support for Retirement Planning. The middle bar demonstrates 42%, or 5 out of 12, offered multiple supports. So that included financial planning, plus perhaps EFAP, so employee family programs, seminars, coaching, or healthy living websites. And the final bar on the right indicates that within, these are a subset of the five organizations in the middle bar. And that indicates that 25% of the 12 organizations, so of all the respondents, offer non-financial retirement support. Again, through the support such as EFAP, coaching, or access to healthy living websites. So what this means is that if 25% of businesses offer non-financial retirement support, then the rest of the businesses don't offer this support. And therefore, retiring leaders in 75% of businesses are not being supported to prepare psychologically for their retirement. This need may not be expressed or recognized in the workplace or by the retiring leaders for a variety of reasons. And regarding the non-financial retirement support, it is not known if the third-party service providers and or their respective websites are being accessed by employees or how useful they are. Also unknown is if leaders have access to advisors or coaches around the non-financial retirement issues. This would require further study.
All right. So now let's move on to the incoming leader. So the data in this chart shows 4 different levels of support that businesses have in place for the incoming leader. The first bar on the left there is the level of support that there was nothing formal. So we found that 2 out of 12 organizations, or 17%, offered no formal support for the incoming leader. Then the next bar there to the left is the level of support was that they provided the basics. So 2 out of 12 organizations, or once again 17%, provided things like, of course, an office or a work location, and then also a phone if needed, a key if they needed, and basic equipment. Then the third bar there is 1 out of 12 organizations, or 8%, provided ongoing support to train for the position. And this was in the form of direction for their work or giving them expectations for results. Then the fourth bar there is 7 out of 12 or organizations, or 58%, provided ongoing support to develop in the position and in the organization. And this support was more for the senior level leaders. And it was about helping them know, what the position was about, also learn about the organization and its culture, and understand the business's position in the industry. Considering here the incoming leaders, here's a list of the current supports that we found for the incoming leader. So the first one is cross-training, and it also involved job shadowing. Then there was supports for onboarding, so things like a toolkit, checklists, forms, and policies. For the relationship building, there was like a process to meet people or to meet key stakeholders. For the job expectations, that included things like work plans, performance expectations, and perhaps even a job manual that was ready to go. Overlap start and end dates was for a senior position to have like a month overlap, so then they could really transfer information and meet, the new person could meet key or start to build key relationships. And then there's the mentoring and the coaching. So here's something we found very interesting. In the previous slide, we saw that 58%, or 7 out of 12 organizations, there was no support or no formal support for the retiring leader. And here we see exactly the opposite. We see in that far right bar, 58%, or 7 out of 12 organizations offer ongoing support to incoming leaders. So we see that these numbers really show an imbalance between the levels of support for the retiring and the incoming leaders. And many of you may be asking, why invest in supporting the retiring leader? And that's a good question. Given our conversations with the research respondents, look, we strongly believe that businesses would benefit by continuing to support the retiring leaders through, authentically valuing their knowledge, experience, and those key relationships, and really working with them to transfer all of this to the incoming leader. And then this would enhance the support for the incoming leader. As you may recall, there's 316,000 baby boomers who will be retiring each year for the next decade. So that's the 3.3 million Canadians. So there may be fewer skilled leaders who are effectively prepared to replace your current staff. So these leader transition strategies are important.
So now let's look at what businesses told us about the dollar value or cost to these businesses if the transition fails. So first, if the transition fails for the retiring leader, overall, the responses showed that potentially there would be significant wide-ranging financial costs from $28,000 up to $3.3 million. And note that the $3.3 million represented 85% of the budget for one business. So this leader said that if the transition failed in this particular area, then 85% of their budget could disappear. So 62% of respondents did not know or were unsure of a dollar value. And then these costs were direct costs, like the cost of hiring or lost income. Indirect costs like service disruption or project delays would be additional costs. And it's also important to know that costs were difficult to quantify as it varied based on the level of the role in the organization. The second row shows the dollar value or the costs if the transition fails for the incoming leader. So overall, the responses showed that potentially there would be significant wide-ranging financial costs from tens of thousands of dollars to the 3.3 million, and that's the same as I just mentioned. These estimated costs were unknown by 31% of the respondents. And these costs were direct costs, again, like the cost of hiring or lost income. Indirect costs like service disruption or project delays would be additional as well. And also costs were difficult to quantify as it varied, again, based on the level of the role of the leader. So we observed that there were far more respondents who did not know or were unsure of the costs should the transition fail for the retiring leader as compared to the incoming leader. For the retiring leader, the actual financial costs were perhaps not as easily identified because they were replacing the leader. And so the business expected programs and services to continue.
So we want to acknowledge that a lot has happened or changed in the businesses and organizations in the past couple of months. So with being into the COVID-19 threat, so we anticipate that some of the effects of the COVID-19 threat will make preparation for transition urgent and more important. So here are some of our thoughts regarding transitions. For the leaders in transition, now there's another layer of complexity as leaders are leading in even a more intense VUCA, which means in the environment that is volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. The leaders that come into an organization may be expecting to, an organization that's new to them may be expected to have the current leaders support them. But meanwhile, the current leaders may still be in transition themselves because of changes to the working from home or moving back to the office or new safety and cleaning procedures at the workplace. And these changes, process changes can even change the culture of an organization or business. So the new leader coming in may not get the level of support that they were hoping for, and the business may not provide what they had hoped for as well. So also, business leaders continue to wonder, what changes will be long-term and what will be temporary. They're in this state of flux. So as employees who are working remotely and in the midst of so much uncertainty, business leaders, we're thinking business leaders will need to pay attention to the morale, to engagement, and to communication for both themselves and their staff. And the other point there is around leader onboarding and developing teams in this COVID environment will require, new approaches to ensure that new leaders really build those strong working relationships and strong teams.
So regarding succession planning, it was important before COVID, and it's even more important now because we're all vulnerable and businesses need to plan for and develop that succession plan. For leaders who are considering retirement, with the restrictions on travel, decreased volunteer opportunities, potential social isolation, and even worries and fears about contracting the virus, they may shift how they view their life purpose after retirement. You know, what will they do? How will they bring meaning into their life? And may now be motivated to create that lifestyle plan, but also to manage any fears and concerns that they may have generally around a retirement. And then the last point there is the older workers may wait longer to retire to allow their financial portfolios to rebound and to grow. As we know, markets are volatile and they will continue to be so for some time to come. So this means that leaders may stay at work longer and be in a transitional period even longer.
So now we're going to move on to looking at some strategic actions to consider for these retiring and incoming leaders. So it's our observation that there is a window of opportunity to better prepare for and support the leader transitions by creating a multifaceted program, including 3 different levels. So those levels being the individual or personal leader level, the level of the leader's role, and also the organizational wide level. So this approach would more fully engage all leaders and build a solid and succession and transition plan. So we're going to start at the individual leader level, and here are our thoughts on some strategic actions to consider. First of all, to have career conversations with individual leaders to understand the leaders' challenges, their goals and plans, and provide key support for both the retiring and the incoming leader for what they are wanting as their future. Another one is to have personal and professional development conversations to discuss, struggles that they're having, set some key goals, raise crucial topics that need to be addressed, make some decisions, do planning, and really support their personal transition and growth. And then performance support conversations are with the leaders to enable the achievement of business goals. So these are the frequent, regular, work-focused conversations. Another suggestion is to offer coaching and mentoring for the leader's development. And then lastly, to support the retiring leader to transition and help them manage their fears and challenges in both the financial and non-financial areas. So moving on to the level of the leader's role in the organization. And here are some strategic actions to consider. First of all, to develop a cross-training program aimed at building the skills of the employees in the company to ensure the effective performance of all the roles and responsibilities required to run the business and support business continuity. Secondly, to develop a transition support team, which includes the retiring leader to ensure then the continued role effectiveness once again, and really to be able to engage those stakeholders, support the business initiatives, transfer key knowledge, and strategically communicate about what's happening with this transition. And the third one there is to develop a leadership development program to build leaders' abilities through some growth assignments, team coaching, and other educational development experiences that really help people to grow while they work. So really looking at supporting the business strategies and goals.
And then for the organization, we're making a suggestion around developing an onboarding process beyond the basic resource setup. And this would help to fully integrate the leader into their team, understand the culture, and to quickly become proficient. Then develop a strategy to actively support incoming and retiring leaders, to develop and implement a change leadership strategy to enable the adoption of new ideas. And then even considering developing and adopting an age-friendly workplace program. And what this means is that the workplace would offer a flexibility in terms of part-time, casual work, consulting, and even project work. and also positively engaging older workers to maximize their contributions. Then we would suggest developing an ongoing risk mitigation program. So around leadership transition, developing a talent management strategy so that this would introduce and align the succession plan, the workforce plan, and a leadership development program. And then develop a communication plan around retirement and leader transition so that employees know the plan around the transition to decrease any fears and uncertainties they may have. And then finally, to ensure strategic use of resourcing to enable effective and timely human resource functions and key leader functions. So that means that you would not have a senior leader doing basic HR functions so that they could focus on their position. So we just want to conclude our presentation here that the research concludes that many businesses are challenged to support leaders to transition effectively. But there is a window of opportunity to better prepare for the rest of the baby boomer retirement tidal wave with greater attention given to workforce and succession planning, offer more robust retirement transition support for the retiring leader, and more extensive leadership support for the incoming leader. And there's also the opportunity to explore how businesses can become age-friendly workplaces in order to retain their senior workers as they continue to make meaningful and valuable contributions. So implementing some of the strategic actions just listed will help businesses plan for and prepare to create a smoother transition for leaders and the business.
So that concludes our research pieces, and so we want to acknowledge that we had some very important and generous support as we completed this project. Ruth Kinzel of Kinzel Cadron Associates gave us feedback, encouragement, and guidance as we worked to sort and to synthesize and to summarize our data. And then Sharon Rose also supported us as a sounding board and another perspective for this project. So we really appreciate Ruth and Sharon's contributions as they're both experienced and skilled researchers.
And we also wanted to thank our survey respondents who gave up their time in this project, as well as you for downloading this webinar and listening to us.
Definitely. So we will have the Business Leader Exit and Entry research report available through these links, and you can download the report. You'll and also we are available to chat with you or anyone else you might think is interested, and you can share this information with them. Really, we would be interested in helping you to discover the level of readiness in your own business or organization. So our contact information is on the slide. We'd like to hear from you, and we really thank you for joining us in this presentation, and we hope to be speaking with you in the near future.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.